Series 3, Day 5. I found her on the morning of Day 5. I want to tell you about Sarah Chen before I tell you what happened to her, because I need you to understand that she was real. She was not just a person I found in a crisis. She was a 41-year-old emergency room nurse who had worked at the county hospital 12 miles outside Harlow Creek for 9 years. She had a daughter named Lily who was 8 years old and staying with Sarah's mother in Billings when everything happened. She kept a photo of Lily in the front pocket of her scrubs, and she checked it every time she thought I was not looking. She had a laugh that started quiet and built into something that took over her whole face. I only heard it once in the 2 days we were together, and I'm glad I got to hear it even once, because after everything that happened, I needed to know that sound had existed in this town before the silence took everything else. I found her in the basement of Harlow Creek Elementary School. I had been moving carefully through town for 2 days since the incident with Kevin on the road. 2 days of slow, deliberate movement between buildings. 2 days of stopping every 30 seconds to press my hand against my chest and check my own pulse. 2 days of eating half portions to make my supplies last and drinking water in careful, measured sips. 2 days of writing everything down in my notebook every time I stopped, because writing it down made it feel like someone, somewhere might eventually read it and know what happened here, even if I did not make it out to tell them myself. I had developed a system for moving between buildings. I called it the 4-step check. Step 1, listen at the door for 2 full minutes before opening it. Step 2, open the door 1 inch and wait 30 seconds. Step 3, scan the full visible area before moving. Step 4, cross to the next building in a slow walk with my hand on my chest, monitoring my heart rate the whole way. Slow, steady, 62 beats per minute. Always 62 if I could manage it. The elementary school was 3 blocks from the church where I had been sheltering. I needed to check it for supplies. The cafeteria would have food. The nurse's office would have medical supplies and possibly more of my heart medication if they stocked the same brand. I had been rationing my pills for 4 days, and I was starting to feel the edges of what happens when the medication thins out in your system. A low flutter behind my sternum, a slight irregularity in the rhythm that I felt more than heard. My body sending me warnings I could not afford to ignore. I did the 4-step check at the school's side entrance, listened for 2 minutes, heard nothing, opened the door 1 inch and waited. Nothing. Scanned the hallway, empty lockers, construction paper artwork still taped to the walls, a row of small rubber boots lined up by the door, belonging to children who would never come back to collect them. I looked at those boots for a long time before I made myself look away and move. The cafeteria gave me 4 cans of peaches, 2 boxes of crackers, a jar of peanut butter, and a case of juice boxes that I felt briefly embarrassed about taking before remembering that embarrassment was a luxury I could not afford. The nurse's office gave me bandages, antiseptic, and a bottle of a different heart medication than mine, but close enough in mechanism that my doctor had once mentioned it as an alternative. I took everything. I was heading back toward the side entrance when I heard it. A sound from below, faint, rhythmic, coming up through the floor from the basement beneath the cafeteria. I stopped walking immediately, hand on chest. 62. Stay at 62. I stood completely still for 90 seconds listening to that sound. It was too irregular to be mechanical, too soft for the creature. It had a human quality to it, a fragility that the creature sounds never had. Someone was crying in the basement. I found the basement door behind the cafeteria serving counter. I did the 4-step check twice before I opened it. Then I went down the stairs 1 at a time, hand on the wall, each foot placed carefully to avoid any creak from the old wooden steps. She was in the far corner behind a stack of folded cafeteria tables, sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest, still in her hospital scrubs from whatever shift she had been working when everything started. She had a flashlight in one hand, pointed at the floor, and a fire extinguisher in the other hand, held up and ready. When my light hit her, she made a sound and swung the extinguisher back, and I said, "Wait, wait, wait! I am not one of them. I am a person. I am real." And I held my hand flat in front of me, and she looked at my hand for a long time before she looked at my face. Her name was Sarah Chen. She had been in that basement for 3 days. She had been driving home from a night shift
when the road out of town had simply stopped existing. Not blocked, not damaged, stopped. The road was there, and then it was not there, and beyond where it ended was just wrong somehow, in a way she said she could not describe properly, except that looking at it made her feel like her brain was trying to process something it had no category for. She had turned around and driven back into town and abandoned her car when the creature crossed the road 2 blocks ahead of her, and she had run and found the school and gone underground and stayed there. She was a nurse. She had been taking stock of her situation with a clinical precision that I recognized immediately as the same thing I had been doing with my survival rules. She had water from the basement utility sink. She had a small amount of food she had found in a staff room refrigerator. She had the fire extinguisher, which she had decided was the best available weapon in a building full of things that were useless against something that size. I told her about my heart condition in the first 10 minutes. I needed her to know, because if something happened, she needed to understand why I could not run, and she needed to not panic around me, and she needed to know that my survival depended on staying calm, even when calm was the last thing either of us felt. She listened to everything I told her without interrupting. Then she reached into her scrubs pocket and pulled out a small pulse oximeter, the kind nurses carry to check oxygen levels, and clipped it on my finger and watched the reading for 30 seconds. She said my resting rate was higher than she wanted it to be. She said 68 was not dangerous, but it was not the 62 I had been aiming for. She said the medication I had found in the nurse's office would help, and she went through the dosage with me carefully and made me write it down in my notebook while she watched. Then she asked me if I had a plan. I showed her my notebook. She read every page without speaking. When she finished, she looked up at me and said 2 survivors with a plan were significantly better odds than 1 survivor with a plan and 1 survivor with a fire extinguisher. I almost smiled. She almost smiled. Neither of us quite got there. We spent the rest of day 5 together in that basement, planning our next move. Sarah was methodical in a way that balanced my instinctive approach, and together we mapped out everything we knew about the creature's patterns. It moved slower in daylight. It stayed closer to the center of town nighttime. It had not shown any interest in buildings that had no living heartbeats inside them, which meant as long as we controlled our heart rates, we were functionally invisible to it while we stayed still. The moment we moved, our rates went up and the window of safety narrowed. Sarah said it reminded her of a predator she had read about that hunted by detecting the bioelectric fields of its prey. She said some sharks do it. She said the creature might be doing something similar, but calibrated to mammalian heartbeats specifically. She said this in the calm, even voice of someone explaining a medical procedure, and I looked at her in the blue glow of our 2 flashlights and thought that I had never been more grateful for another human being in my life. That night, we heard it pass above us, once, twice, 3 times, each pass slower than the last, like it was narrowing something down, like it was triangulating. The ground vibration came through the concrete floor and up into our bones, and each time it passed, Sarah and I pressed our backs against the wall, and I watched the pulse oximeter on my finger, and breathed and counted and held on to 68 with everything I had. The 3rd time it passed, it stopped directly above us. I looked at Sarah. She looked at me. She had both hands flat on the floor, feeling the vibration. She shook her head slowly at me. A small, precise movement, meaning do not move, do not breathe, do not let your heart rate spike, do not make a sound. We sat completely still for 4 minutes while something the size of a building stood directly above us. Then it moved on. Sarah let out a breath so slowly and carefully it was almost silent. I watched the pulse oximeter. 68, still 68. I had held it at 68 while something ancient and enormous stood 1 floor above me, and I felt a fierce private pride in that number that I have no other words for. We ate cold peaches from the can in silence after that. Sarah checked the photo of Lily in her pocket. I watched her look at it and look away, and I did not say anything because there was nothing to say. We slept in shifts, 2 hours each. We, one awake, watched the stairs and monitored the vibrations in the floor and kept a hand on the fire extinguisher. At 3 a.m. on the morning of day 6, I was on watch and Sarah was asleep when I heard the vibration change. It was not above us this time. It was not passing by. It was coming from a different direction entirely, from deeper underground, below the basement, below the foundation of the school, something vibrating up through the bedrock itself in a pattern that I had not felt before. Not the breathing rhythm of the creature moving above ground, something else, something that felt almost like a signal, like a frequency being broadcast upward through the earth. I put my hand on Sarah's shoulder to wake her, and she was awake before I finished the motion because she had not really been asleep either. She felt the vibration through the floor with both palms. Her face changed in a way I had not seen before. Not the controlled, clinical calm she had maintained since I found her. Something underneath that, something older and more animal. She looked at me and said, "We need to leave this building right now." I asked her why. She said the vibration pattern had changed. She said in the 3 days she had been in this basement, the vibration had always come from above, always from the creature moving on the surface. She said this was coming from below, and it was getting stronger,